When a crisis arrives, it almost never starts with a massive disaster. It starts with something small and humiliating: the empty supermarket shelf, a tomato that costs more than it did yesterday, the rain that fails to fall when it should. The soil in your garden becomes as hard as concrete, even when you water it. In my field records, I've found that this is the exact moment. An uncomfortable question surfaces: is the problem really you? Or were you forced to depend on a system that was designed to break? For years, we were sold the same narrative. If you don't produce, it's because you don't know how. If your garden fails, it's because you lack a green thumb. If your harvest withers, it's because you lack discipline. But the real scene is different. There are entire families paying more for food every month. There are small producers squeezed by fuel costs, inputs, water, and transport. The most perverse part is that fragility doesn't always look like fragility. Sometimes it is disguised as routine. You go to buy lettuce and it is overpriced. You go to plant and they tell you that you need bags, fertilizer, pesticides, improved seeds, constant irrigation, an exact calendar, and perfect soil, and even then, there is no guarantee of anything. Everything is set up so that you depend on something external. A bill, a delivery, a long chain that snaps with a single drought, a frost, or a logistical problem on the other side of the world. When that chain breaks, the blame falls on the person at home, staring at empty pots, watching leaves curl at noon, or seeing the soil lose its life and turn to dust. But that is not a personal failure. It is an architecture of dependency. It is a system that lets you buy food but doesn't let you sustain it. A model that teaches you to consume but not to reclaim autonomy. This is why so many people feel trapped, no matter how hard they try. They are playing within rules that always favor the same players. You pay for the water, the land, the seed, the transport, and you pay to repair the damage the system itself caused. If something goes wrong, they tell you to try again, as if the problem were perseverance rather than design. The hardest part is that this is already visible in the everyday. A heat wave burns what you sowed. A dry wind steals the moisture in a single afternoon. Compacted soil stops breathing, and water runs off without entering. You water and water again, and yet the plants continue to suffer. From the outside, it looks like bad luck. In my analysis of energy capture, I've realized this is actually the price of having forgotten how a living system functions. A healthy soil is not just dirt, it is a network. A place where roots, fungi, bacteria, and organic matter work like a subterranean city. When that network is alive, water is retained better. The plant resists more, and the heat hits less. When that network dies, everything becomes expensive. The irrigation, the fertilizers, the effort, and the time. What was once an ecosystem becomes a maintenance problem. This is where many realize they don't lack will. They lack a framework that isn't designed to exhaust them. They need a framework that doesn't force them to fight against nature, but to work with it. That difference, though it seems small, changes everything. It is not about producing more at the cost of more wear and tear. It is about leaving a logic that always keeps you on the edge of scarcity. The good news is that the exit doesn't start with big machines or impossible investments. It starts with observing what is draining your energy, your water, and your soil. It starts by recognizing that the problem isn't that people no longer want to grow. The problem is that almost everything is made to make cultivation harder, more expensive, and more dependent than it should be. When you see that clearly, something shifts. You stop thinking about failure and start thinking about rescue. You stop blaming yourself for not fitting into an exhausted system and start looking for a different way to produce, to store, and to protect what you eat, because in uncertain times, the question is no longer whether you know how to sow. The question is, who controls your food when everything else fails? What appears to be an unstoppable advance in modern agriculture has become a silent trap. They sold you the idea that more chemicals, more tilled earth, and more nutritive products would guarantee abundant and healthy harvests. But that promise is buried under tons of dead earth. Synthetic fertilizers and herbicides don't just kill weeds. They kill the intricate, invisible network of fungi that sustains the life of the soil. That mycorrhizal network, the spirit and lungs of the earth, disappears little by little. And with it, the natural capacity of the land to regenerate and protect plants. Through my records of soil microbiology, I've seen long rows of earth churn to the limit. Without cover or life, every plow breaks the microscopic connections between roots, beneficial bacteria, and fungi that build the soil's natural immune system. The surface layers that used to store moisture and nutrients now turn to dust. Exposed to the sun and the wind, the soil becomes immune to itself, unable to defend against pests and diseases that once appeared only in small episodes. But here is the perverse trick. Every year, to ensure a visible yield, farmers depend on increasing doses of chemicals, entering a cycle that can only end in higher costs and growing challenges. Buying expensive fertilizers becomes the only way to keep that exhausted soil alive. The land, instead of being an ally that renews itself over time, transforms into a burden that forces more money and work to be invested. It is a system designed so that you can never leave the vicious circle. The promise of nutritious soil full of organic matter is reduced to bags full of chemical substances that, ironically, kill the very base of that nutrition, microbial life. Without fungi to perforate the earth to help plants absorb water and minerals, without bacteria to process and transform nutrients, and without natural strategies to retain moisture, that soil is condemned to dry up and lose productivity despite technological help. This agronegotio disguised as progress has distorted what it means to cultivate. The land is no longer a vibrant ecosystem, but a factory that requires constant maintenance. The bills rise, the quality falls, and anxiety grows. The dependence on external inputs becomes a high-cost prison. Meanwhile, the true food, the kind born from the natural and regenerative richness of the soil, is lost along the way. Perhaps you felt that frustration when your garden doesn't prosper, or when the vegetables in the store rise in price and lose flavor. It is not a lack of effort or love. You are trapped in an industrial machinery that sells quick solutions but destroys the foundations. This is the moment to understand that chemical agriculture is the great lie, a system that makes you believe the soil regenerates with chemicals, when in reality it is slowly destroying it. Now, if you want to rediscover how to support living soil and break with this dependency, there are paths the industry will not show you. But before that, we must understand how this mirage was built. In my records, until we understand this deception, the cycle will continue, and sovereignty over our food will remain an illusion. It seems impossible, but there is the trap. It is not the panel that creates the water. It is the air when you finally force it to reveal what it was hiding. A few meters away, with the same humidity and almost the same landscape, one system can collect double what another does, and the difference is not in luck. If the wind doesn't cross the mesh, nothing happens. The vapor surrounds the structure as if it didn't exist. That is why the panel isn't placed just anywhere. It has to face the wind directly. Not sideways, not halfway, head-on. When the air passes through the threads, it loses speed, cools down a bit, and releases moisture. That's where the first drops begin to appear, so small you don't even notice them at first. Then they gather, grow heavier, and slide down under their own weight. It is a silent but very physical mechanism. Nothing mystical, just air, temperature, and a well-oriented surface. There is still another error that ruins everything without people seeing it coming. Sticking the structure to the ground. Near the floor, the air is usually warmer and drier. It seems silly to move it a few inches, but raising it just 33 centimeters already changes the game. Even a few bricks will work. That small space allows the airflow to circulate better and prevents the system from working in a dead zone. The same happens with the morning sun. If it hits directly at dawn, it evaporates the dew before it falls into the gutter. All the work of the night can be lost in minutes. That's why early shade matters so much. A wall, a tree, any simple barrier can protect what the night managed to gather. When this is installed well, you begin to see something almost insulting to common sense. Water appearing where there was nothing, not by magic, but because the night cools the air releases moisture, and the mesh acts as an invisible trap. Each fiber intercepts microdrops. Each drop grows, each one finds its way down. Therefore, in a single dawn, there can already be a small volume accumulated in the gutter. It may not seem like much at first, but the real question is not how much a single night gives. The question is what happens when you stop looking at this as a trick and start seeing it as a law of the land. In my study of microclimates, I've documented how orientation, dominant breezes, height, shade, and ambient humidity all change the result. In coastal areas, near rivers or lakes, the yield can rise impressively. What seems like a modest experiment to one person becomes a useful, repeatable, and free reserve for another. That is the kind of knowledge that makes no noise but changes your relationship with the environment. If the air is already loaded with water, then the real question is, where else this same exchange is occurring without anyone looking? Imagine a simple structure, as simple as an expanded mesh, that collects a few drops of water every night. It seems like little. But if you expand that surface to 3.3 meters or more, the volume you capture can supply an entire family. The surprising thing is that this water never touched the ground, nor passed through contaminated pipes. It comes directly from the air, pure and invisible until the condensation appears. But not everything is so automatic. Before drinking it, there is a vital step to ensure its potability. Without spending money or complications, a home filter. Made with materials within anyone's reach, you only need a recycled plastic bottle. Cotton, activated carbon, the same kind sold in aquarium stores for a handful of coins, and a thin layer of sand. When the water passes through this improvised filter, the impurities and particles are trapped. Thus, the liquid that reaches your glass is clean, free of dust or invisible residues. If you want to go a step further, just by boiling that water for a few minutes or adding a drop of bleach per liter, and waiting 33 minutes, you eliminate any microorganisms that might remain. Nothing complicated, almost an ancestral ritual. The best part is that this clean water emerges from the fog that others barely notice while you sleep. Through my research into ancient water systems, I've found that this practice is not modern but forgotten wisdom. Thousands of years ago, civilizations already recognized how the nightly Orvalho could feed them. In the mountains of South America, communities raised inclined stones, cool surfaces where the mist slowly condensed into drops. During the night, the water drained calmly, accumulating in natural reservoirs ready to drink. Today, even in the Canary Islands, huge nets capture the mist to quench the thirst of their inhabitants. We are rediscovering a principle that was left out of sight, because it seems too simple for modern systems, too cheap for the markets, and too invisible for the urgency of the day. But it is precisely in that doing less, placing a piece of paper, letting dry leaves accumulate, or burying dead branches, where the soil, the air, and the web of life begin to function by themselves. When you remove the excess of intervention, nature responds with mechanisms we have forgotten, but that are still there waiting to be activated. Just like this ancient technique of extracting water from the air, the key is to observe, take the minimum, and let the system recover its balance. The water appears without asking for large investments. The earth breathes and produces without us forcing it. And we recover part of the control lost over our own survival. I often ask my subjects, why don't we make these simple movements in our own backyard? What would happen if instead of searching for complicated solutions, we relied on these forgotten ecological levers? I want to know your experience. Have you ever tried something so simple that it seemed it wouldn't work, yet it surprised you? While the world panics over scarcity and the fragility of supply systems, someone calm opens the back door of their house and picks fresh vegetables from their garden. While supermarkets raise prices and long lines multiply, this simple act becomes a silent challenge. It is a claim of autonomy, a reaffirmation of sovereignty in the face of crisis. It is not just about growing plants, but about reclaiming control over what puts food on our table when everything around us seems unstable and alien. This sovereignty is not a luxury or a pastime. It is an urgent and deeply political necessity. While others depend on complex distribution chains vulnerable to any interruption, he who cares for his land, who understands his soil and trusts in natural cycles, maintains a fortress against chaos. It doesn't matter if he started with doubts or without experience, because today the tools are as simple as meshes that capture the fog or recycled tubes that collect water from the air. Ancestral techniques, forgotten for the convenience of modernity, come back to life to give us real power, that of producing what we need, when others can only buy it expensive or lose it. In my analysis of small-scale resilience, I've mapped the transition from dependency to independence. Imagine no longer depending on the supermarket, no longer fearing the next economic or climatic crisis. Imagine opening your pantry and finding not only cans and packages, but own and living foods born from the soil you care for yourself. That is the essence of the contract we sign today with the earth. An agreement of respect and co-responsibility where nature returns its abundance to us. In exchange for care, where we recover not only food, but the dignity of deciding how and from where it arrives. No more rushes, no more desperation. Only that moment of taking a carrot or a fresh leaf, knowing it was grown with our hands. In our own refuge, this is the real start of a silent resistance. A movement that is not seen in the big news, but that grows in every garden, on every balcony, in every small rebel plot against the system that forgets us. It is not just agriculture, it is a declaration of independence. While some fight for packages and offers, others are already cultivating the future, reclaiming an elementary right to feed themselves without intermediaries, to be masters of their destiny before the storm. I'm currently tracking the expansion of these independent plots. Are you ready for that daily act of sowing and harvesting? To be transformed into the greatest victory you can celebrate today. Each root that sprouts is an answer to fear, a flag raised where there seem to be only shadows. The future belongs to those who cultivate, not those who wait. And you, what are you cultivating?